now I'd like to show you some of the artifacts that we've been finding. You've probably seen some photographs, but I've got the actual materials here. Do you want to guess what the most common item that we find here, aside from, rocks and soil? Coins? No, coins are very rare. We have found coins, but they're very rare. It's a good guess, though.
Pottery?
Pottery is definitely one of the top three, I would say. Any other guesses?
Shells.
Beads are kind of rare, so skulls, I would say, is in the ballpark. Yeah, animal bones. Tons and tons of animal bones, sheep and cattle and pig particularly. And then the other big thing is building materials. As I mentioned, there was a building here. There were at least two buildings here that have been demolished. They're just spread across the site. So bricks and tiles and that sort of thing. Lots and lots of those. So we'll pass them around after we look at the finer artifacts. So these things here...
What about human bones? Because there were 6,000 Indians buried in this area.
Yeah, and believe it or not, virtually all of them were buried in that little cemetery right there. You get a lot of reuse of the same graves and that sort of thing. But there is a marked cemetery, and that's where, as far as we know, all the purposeful burials were made. So that's a good question, though. So the things I'm showing you now are sort of less common, but this is Native American-made pottery, made right here. Native Americans, and I can bring it up closer to you. Native Americans in this area did not make pottery prior to the Spanish coming here. But when the Spanish got here, the missionaries encouraged them to make pottery in the same style that their cousins to the south, the folks that lived in San Diego County and down in Imperial County, made. So it's traditional Native American pottery, but it's new to this area when the Native Americans got here. They've also got Mexican pottery, Majolica it's called, imported from Mexico, pottery imported from England, and then other softer earthenwares. Shell beads were used both as decoration and as money prior to the Europeans coming, and that tradition continued into the historic period. What the Europeans brought into it is their own beads. So you get these glass beads. We've got a fair number of those as well, imported mostly from Italy. Right near Venice is where one of the big bead making factories was, that come over here as well. So, and then you get kind of the typical 19th century glass and pottery and that sort of thing. We've got a trash pit that I didn't mention in the center of that building. I think the building fell down. Afterwards, somebody put their trash in there. Trash pit's probably 1890s, where the building's early 1800s. So it's a later generation, but just filled full of American period trash. So chamber pots, and it's amazing how much more stuff we have than the Spaniards did and the Mexicans did that lived here. But sheep shears, 3 pairs of sheep shears so far, gun flints, ceramic smoking pipe. Yes, ma'am.
What is the largest piece we found so far?
Largest piece of what?
Artifacts.
I would say the building materials are the largest things that we found. So whole roof tiles, that sort of thing. Have you all had a chance to take a look at these? Unfortunately, I can't pass them around because they tend to sort of fall out. But we've got animal bones as well. Like I said, animal bones are very, very common. So this is a big horse tooth, and then other large animal bones, just really big things. And I imagine the casual observer might think, oh my gosh, that's a human body, but it's not. They're cow bones and sheep, lots and lots of them. The San Gabriel mission, I don't know if you're aware of this, is among the wealthiest of the missions. And during that era, wealth was measured in cattle hides. Coinage and money wasn't really common, but cattle were. That was the main product that they had. So we've got roof tiles, and well, actually these are all roof tiles you can pass around, very much like the ones that are on the New Mission Church over there or this apartment building, except that these are 200 years old. So but we find just thousands of these. Very likely made here locally by Native American hands. One of them we found so far has a dog footprint in it, which is kind of fun. There's a sign in the Mission Museum that says children, I don't know if it's true or not, but it says children were put in charge of guarding these as they dried before they fired them to make sure animals didn't walk across them. So I think it's kind of fun to think that a kid fell asleep at the job, or walked away to chase a ball or something, let a dog walk across it.
Do you have them all back? No, they're coming.
My apologies.
John, you said the building that you found. Now, do you know what are the materials the walls made of? Is it adobe? Is it stone?
So we found stone foundations to an adobe building. So the adobe's melted and gone, but you can see kind of remnants of it. So
because I was going to say it doesn't stay at the end.
It doesn't. Once you lose the roof, the whole thing melts pretty quickly, right? So we've just got the foundations, but you can kind of see the melt in the cross section, and you can see the plaster and the tar from the roof. So local tar. They were using it to cover the roof. So I do have an 1856 drawing that shows the building in about that area with those dimensions. I don't know what it is, but it does show up in at least one image. Yes, sir.
Is there any way to check? I'm assuming the tar probably came from the La Brea tar pits more than
Well,
likely,
there was
or?
reputedly a tar source right here in San Gabriel.
Really?
Yeah, anthropologists in the early 20th century noted it, but didn't say specifically where it is. One of our archaeologists, actually the woman taking the photograph back there, is doing some study on asphaltum sources in Southern California, and so.
Now, is there a way of checking it chemically to see if it is the same as what comes out of La Brea?
That is exactly. Katie, would you mind telling us about your study?
Oh.
On the spot.
Yeah, that's what I'm doing right now. Is I'm trying to source asphaltum to see where it came from. There are historically documented seeps in Los Angeles and in Ventura County, and you can use, it's called GCMS, gas chromatography mass spectrometry, and you could trace it looking at some biomarkers. So
Cool.
that's what I'm doing right now. Hopefully I can get a piece of the asphaltum that's here.
I think I can arrange that.
We can figure out where it's coming from.
Very nice.
Where do you think that there is sources of tar in this San Gabriel Valley?
Well, there was supposedly one right around here, but it could have just dried up, so that it could have been imported from somewhere
Or someplace like that?
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
It's only one. We've only found one arrowhead so far. Yeah, that's it. So it's actually, I guess it's good asking yourself what traditional technologies should survive when the Spanish get here. They start bringing in things like metal and guns. We've got 2 gun flints, right? So do the Native Americans still need bows and arrows? Probably, right? If guns are kind of rare, and maybe there's obviously some tension between the Native Americans and the Spanish. There was an attempted revolt here, as there were in many of the missions, so perhaps they kept guns out of their hands, and the bow and arrow was still used for hunting deer and that sort of thing. Although we thought that for years with African American slaves and African slaves in the South, and it turns out they actually did have access to guns. You find them in slave quarters that are excavated in the South. So here I actually don't know whether Native Americans had access to guns, but we do know that there's at least one arrowhead that tells us that technology survived into the mission period. And I would guess for deer hunting, that sort of thing. So just one so far, and it's absolutely the typical type found in the late period. So just a tiny little triangle. But we're going to send that off. Some of our special finds are that, and we also found a part of the mill wheel, which is described well in the literature. It was broken and lost, and we found a broken piece of it. And so we're going to send both of those off to a lab that I know in Colorado that does blood residue analysis for the arrowhead that can tell us what kind of animals were killed with it, if any. And then the milling stone we're going to send for pollen phytolith analysis that'll tell us what kind of grain was ground with it. Now I expect that we'll get corn and wheat because that's what the history tells us, but wouldn't it be interesting if there was other things in there as well, if they were grinding local grains or something. So there's more that we can do, yeah.
The Indian culture that was around the mission, where would have been the closest one? Pasadena or out towards El Monte? What other site would
You mean
be?
village, that sort of thing?
Yes,
So there were villages all over the place, and this mission location was chosen because it was next to a village. Because of course, I said earlier that their main product was cattle. Cattle were actually a means to the end for the Spanish. The main product were Native Americans. The whole goal was to create a community and convert Native Americans into Christianity and turn them into essentially Spanish citizenry. So there was a village here, which is why they put it here, to capture those people's hearts and minds. But specifically where I don't know. Many of you have probably seen Mike Hart's paintings that are in the Huntington, and now he's got some hung across the street. He places it over there somewhere, and I'm kind of dying to know why. Other scholars have placed it in the park over there, but I don't have direct evidence, but I expect that there was a village very, very close to here.
So the old mill in San Marino was a part of the San Gabriel mission?
Yes.
Oh, there was.
That was
Because
built in 1816 for the mission.
We transport the water from Basic Port to mission here, right?
Yeah, so there were waterways, and again, Mike Hart's paintings are great for this, that show where all the waterways went. But that was their first attempt at a grain mill here, and this is their second.
In one of Mr. Hart's paintings, it's the one that shows La Presa there, it's sort of the map view, he shows an archaeological dig site just to the east. Have you had any access to that information on what they found?
I
there,
do, yeah.
or-
A company called LSA did some work back
Right.
there, and I've got their reports. Yeah, much smaller scale than what we're doing here, but they did some excavation there.
Now, is that the same location where those new houses are going up? Would you know offhand?
So yes, so 2 of those new houses there. It looks like they did some excavation in their backyard for pools, and then one of them was on the grounds of the Sunny Slope Water Company proper.
Oh, okay.
But that is the kind of thing I'm trying to cast a broad net. You know, talk to people and look at old reports, and then look at the actual artifacts we find. Tell the full story.
Was there also south of the dam reservation or homes built at that period of time?
Yeah, apparently that's what their excavation is showing. They've got a village name, and they've got, during the historic period, there were Native Americans living there, yeah. Yep. Anybody else? Well, this...
Before you leave the platform, I'd like everybody to get together so we can get a picture of the association. So if there's no other questions.
And then we'll...